It's all right. Just breathe. I'm right here.
Bennett Caldwell paced across the polished marble floor of his penthouse living room, phone pressed to his ear. The early morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Dressed in a sharp-tailored suit, Bennett exuded confidence and control, the aura of a self-made elite CEO. On the other side of the room, Ayanna quietly dusted the shelves, trying to remain unobtrusive as her boss handled a flurry of business calls. Ayanna had been working as Bennett's housekeeper for nearly 8 months, but she had quickly learned his routines and high standards. She moved with careful efficiency, mindful not to interrupt, yet her presence did not go unnoticed by Bennett. Ending the call with a curt promise to circle back after the board meeting, Bennett finally acknowledged Ayanna with a nod. "Good morning," he said in a low, polite tone as he set his phone down. "Good morning, Mr. Caldwell," Ayanna replied softly, pausing her dusting. She offered a courteous smile. Though she was a bit nervous around him, she carried herself with quiet poise. Ayanna was a black American woman in her mid-20s, hard-working and attentive. She had grown accustomed to the rhythms of serving a man like Bennett, powerful, busy and often distant. Bennett grabbed a sleek briefcase from the sofa. In his early 30s, he had climbed from humble beginnings to the upper echelons of business. The modern decor of his penthouse and the city view were daily reminders of how far he had come. As he moved past Ayanna, he noticed a small detail. She had arranged the books on his shelf not only by size, but also by subject, an efficiency he appreciated. "You organized the books," he observed, raising an eyebrow in mild surprise. He was used to staff following rote instructions, but Ayanna often showed initiative. Ayanna straightened, unsure if he was pleased or upset. "Yes, sir. I noticed some of your business books were mixed with the novels. I thought it might be easier for you to find what you need." Her voice was respectful, almost formal, yet there was a warmth beneath it. Bennett nodded slowly. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." His grey eyes lingered on her for a moment longer than usual, as if seeing the maid properly for the first time. Ayanna felt her cheeks warm at his gaze, quickly lowering her eyes. He cleared his throat, snapping back to his brisk manner. "I'll be home late tonight. There's a dinner meeting. Don't wait up. Just make sure the study is open. I might need to review some documents when I return." "Of course, Mr. Caldwell. I'll have everything ready for you," Ayanna answered. With that, Bennett strode out the door, the scent of expensive cologne trailing faintly behind. Ayanna let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Being around Bennett Caldwell always set her a little on edge. Not because he was cruel. In fact, he was generally polite, but because there was something about his presence that made her heart flutter with a mix of admiration and an emotion she dared not name. She reminded herself that he was her employer, nothing more. As the front door clicked shut, Ayanna resumed her tasks. The apartment was immaculate, and her morning duties were nearly done. Yet her mind wandered to the man who had just left. She knew bits and pieces of Bennett's story from whispers among the staff, how he grew up with very little and built his tech company from scratch, how he now managed thousands of employees. He seemed to carry the weight of that responsibility on his broad shoulders. Sometimes, in unguarded moments, Ayanna sensed a loneliness in him, a quiet pain behind his confident demeanor. She shook off the thought and finished polishing the glass coffee table. It wasn't her place to worry about the boss's personal life. Still, she found herself hoping that someday Bennett Caldwell would find happiness beyond the confines of his corner office and luxury penthouse. Unbeknownst to her, that hope was far closer to her own life than she could imagine. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey. What you've just witnessed is only the beginning of Bennett and Ayanna's story. A tale of unexpected love, heartbreaking secrets, and the power of second chances. If you're already feeling the chemistry between our CEO and his kind-hearted Maid, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything and helps us continue bringing you these heartfelt stories. Can you sense the loneliness they both carry? Do you think Bennett will realize what's right in front of him before it's too late? Drop a comment below with your predictions. We love hearing your thoughts. Now, let's see what happens when professional boundaries begin to blur. That evening, Ayana made sure everything was in perfect order for Bennett's return. Fresh documents were neatly stacked on his mahogany desk in the study, and a carafe of coffee sat warming for whenever he came home. He had told her not to wait up, but Ayana took pride in her work and wanted to ensure even his late nights were comfortable. It was nearing 10 p.m. when the front door opened. Ayana, who had been tidying the kitchen as a final task, startled slightly at the sound. Bennett was home much earlier than expected, and as soon as she saw him, her chest tightened with concern. His tie was askew, and the usual confident spark in his eyes was dimmed. "Mr. Caldwell, is everything all right?" she asked gently, stepping forward. It was unusual for him to return before midnight after a business dinner. Bennett closed the door behind him with a heavy sigh. For a moment, he didn't respond. He simply stood in the foyer, shoulders slumped. In his hand was a bottle of champagne, an expensive vintage, but it was unopened, and he set it on a side table with a thud. Ayana noticed his jaw tight, as if he were holding back emotion. He finally looked at her, and Ayana was taken aback by the vulnerability in his expression. I thought you'd have gone home by now," he murmured, voice rough. "I was just finishing up." "I can leave if you'd prefer to be alone, sir," Ayana said softly, though something in her heart urged her to stay. Bennett ran a hand through his hair and shook his head. "No, it's fine. Actually," he paused, clearly weighing whether to speak further. Ayana waited quietly, her empathetic brown eyes fixed on him. "Actually, I could use someone to talk to," he admitted, almost in a whisper. The mighty CEO who barked orders in boardrooms now sounded lost. Ayana's heart clenched at the sight. "Of course," she replied, setting aside the dish towel in her hand. "I'm here if you need to talk." He managed a faint, grateful smile and moved toward the living room, loosening his tie. Ayana followed, keeping a respectful distance until he sank onto the leather sofa with a weary groan. She had never seen him so defeated. Carefully, she took a seat on the opposite end of the couch, hands folded in her lap. For a long moment, Bennett stared at the floor. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. Ayana sensed he was gathering courage to share what troubled him, so she waited patiently. "It's Vivian," he finally said, almost spitting out the name. "We ended things tonight. Or rather, she ended things." His voice wavered between anger and hurt. Ayana's eyes widened slightly. She knew of Vivian Marshall from tabloids, the elegant heiress Bennett had been dating for a year. They were considered a power couple in social circles. "I'm so sorry," Ayana said sincerely. She hesitated, then added, "If you don't mind me asking, what happened?" Bennett let out a bitter chuckle. "She said she's done waiting for me to grow up and stop playing at being a family man." He raked a hand through his hair again. "Apparently, focusing on building my company and not devoting every second to her is an unforgivable sin. And the idea of me ever having a family or settling down, well, she said it's clearly not in my nature." Ayana frowned. "That seems unfair. From what I can see, you work so hard. You have to, with all your responsibilities." He looked at her, surprised by the fierceness in her tone. Vivian never understood that. She thought my drive was an obsession. "Maybe it is," he said, sighing. "But tonight, at the dinner, she embarrassed me in front of my investors. She accused me of neglecting her, of being incapable of love or commitment. Then she walked out, left me sitting there with an untouched bottle of champagne meant to celebrate, a business deal and an audience of colleagues who heard everything." He gestured to the champagne bottle he'd brought home, eyes shining with humiliation. Without thinking, Ayana reached out and placed her hand gently on his forearm. "That's awful," she murmured. "No one deserves to be treated that way, especially not by someone who is supposed to care about you." Bennett looked down at Ayana's hand resting on his sleeve. He didn't pull away. The warmth of her touch was a balm to the cold hurt inside him. "I don't know why I'm telling you all this," he confessed quietly. I didn't want to drink that champagne alone, wallowing in self-pity. Ayana offered a small, encouraging smile. Sometimes, talking helps more than champagne. She glanced toward the kitchen. I could make you some tea or coffee if you like, something to take the edge off the night. He nodded appreciatively. Tea would be nice. Thank you, Ayana. A few minutes later, they sat with steaming mugs of chamomile tea. Bennett's coat was off, draped over a chair, and the tension in his posture had eased slightly. Ayana listened attentively as he spoke in low tones about the pressure he felt. How being a self-made CEO meant people assumed he didn't need anyone, but in truth, he often felt isolated at the top. I have acquaintances, colleagues, but no one I really trust, Bennett admitted, staring into his cup. Vivian was supposed to be my partner, but it turns out she was more interested in the idea of me than who I really am. His gaze shifted to the large window, where city lights twinkled. Maybe she was right about one thing. Maybe I'm not cut out for family life. My own father walked out on my mother and me when I was a kid. I never had a role model for being a husband or a dad. The last words came out with a hitch, surprising even him. Ayana's heart softened even more. She realized this was the first time Bennett had ever opened up about his past. Quietly, she replied, my father wasn't around either. It was just my mom raising me, so I understand a little of how that feels. Bennett turned to her, a glimmer of understanding in his eyes. Your mother must be a strong woman. She raised a daughter as kind and capable as you. It was Ayana's turn to be surprised, and she felt a blush warm her cheeks. Thank you, she said. Mom taught me to work hard and treat people well no matter who they are. I owe everything to her. He smiled for the first time that night, a genuine smile that made him look boyish and vulnerable. She did a wonderful job. He paused, then added softly, You're easy to talk to, Ayana. I appreciate that. A gentle silence settled between them as they sipped their tea. Ayana realized she was still sitting quite close, her hand still resting near his. She began to withdraw it, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the moment. But Bennett caught her hand lightly in his own, before she could pull away. Stay, he murmured. There was a plea in his voice that she'd never heard before. Ayana's breath caught. She met his gaze and saw a storm of emotions there, pain, loneliness, and a yearning for comfort that mirrored her own unspoken longing. In that charged moment, the professional boundaries between CEO and Maid fell away. They were just a man and a woman seeking solace. Neither could say who moved first. One moment, they were looking into each other's eyes. The next, Bennett gently drew Ayana into his arms. She did not resist. Instead, she found herself pressed against his chest, hearing the strong but rapid beat of his heart. You're not alone, Ayana whispered, feeling his warmth envelop her. You're not as unlovable as she said. She was wrong. Bennett closed his eyes at her words, a shuddering breath escaping him. He hadn't realized how desperately he needed to hear that. Thank you, he whispered back. His hand caressed her back gently, as if afraid she might break. Ayana looked up, and in the dim light of the living room, their faces were inches apart. Time seemed to slow. Bennett's gaze flickered to her lips and back to her eyes, silently asking permission. Ayana's heart pounded. Everything in her told her this was risky, that come morning he might regret it, but the tenderness in his eyes banished her fears. She answered by leaning in. Their lips met in a soft, hesitant kiss that quickly deepened as months of unspoken attraction and emotion poured out. Bennett cupped her face, kissing her as though she were the one bright spot in his dark night. Ayana responded with equal warmth, her hand resting against his chest. What began as comfort transformed into passion. Bennett gently guided Ayana to lay back against the cushions, his lips never leaving hers. She trembled, nerves and desire entwined. But he murmured softly, "We can stop if you want." Ayana shook her head slightly, eyes shining. "I don't want to stop," she said, voice scarcely above a breath. With that fragile consent, the last of Bennett's restraint fell away. He kissed her again, and their bodies pressed close in an embrace that felt both inevitable and new. The world outside ceased to exist as they found solace in each other. That night, beneath the city lights and quiet hum of the penthouse, Bennett and Ayana crossed a line that changed their lives forever. In each other's arms, they found warmth and understanding that had been missing for so long. They found love, unexpected, but deep and real. Sunlight filtered through the sheer curtains as morning dawned in the penthouse. Ayana stirred awake, and for a blissful moment she lay still, savoring the warmth of a strong arm draped around her waist. The memories of the previous night rushed back, the closeness, the kisses, the whispered confessions. It felt like a beautiful dream. Carefully, she turned her head. Bennett was still asleep beside her on the sofa, their clothes rumpled. In the gentle morning light, his face looked peaceful, free from the usual tension. Ayana felt a surge of affection at the sight. She lightly brushed a lock of hair from his forehead, heart swelling with hope that this closeness might mean something more than a fleeting night. As if sensing her gaze, Bennett's eyes fluttered open. For an instant, he smiled at her. A soft, genuine smile that made Ayana's heart skip. "Good morning," he murmured, voice husky with sleep. "Good morning," she replied, a shy smile touching her lips. Neither moved, reluctant to break the tender cocoon that had formed around them. But seconds later, reality came crashing in. Bennett's expression shifted, consciousness fully returned, and along with it, the weight of his actions. His arm slipped away from her waist as he abruptly sat up, raking a hand through his hair. I'm sorry," he blurted out, not meeting her eyes. Ayana sat up too, clutching the throw blanket to her chest. The sudden change in his tone sent a prickle of dread through her. "Sorry," she echoed softly. Bennett stood and began to pace, straightening his disheveled shirt. "I shouldn't have let that happen. It was inappropriate. You're my employee. I crossed a line." He spoke quickly, each word like a dagger to Ayana's chest. She rose on unsteady feet, wrapping the blanket around her for modesty. "Last night, it wasn't just you. I was there too," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I wanted it as well." He finally looked at her, conflict in his grey eyes. "That's what makes this so complicated. You work for me, Ayana. I don't want you to feel like I took advantage of you." "I never felt that way," she whispered. She wished he would come back to the gentle man from the night before. Instead, he looked as though he was already building up walls again. Bennett exhaled slowly, trying to gather his thoughts. His emotions were in turmoil. Part of him still felt the lingering tenderness of holding her, but another part, the pragmatic CEO, panicked at the implications. What if she expected something now? What if word got out he slept with a maid? Would she even want anything more? Or was it a mistake for her too? He couldn't read her feelings clearly, and it scared him. "I think," he began, then paused, swallowing hard. "I think it's best if we put this behind us, chalk it up to a moment of weakness." The clinical coldness of the phrase made Ayana flinch. "Put it behind us," she repeated, hurt evident in her eyes. "Bennett, I don't regret what happened." It was the first time she'd ever addressed him by his first name aloud, and it made him flinch in turn. She softened her tone. "Do you truly believe it was just a mistake?" He hesitated. In that pause, Ayana saw the truth. He was conflicted. But fear and pride won out as Bennett's face hardened with resolve. "It shouldn't have happened," he said quietly. "I was emotional and wasn't thinking clearly. I'm sorry if I gave you the wrong impression." Ayana's throat tightened, a mix of embarrassment and heartbreak swirling inside her. She had known this was a risk. She knew the gap between their worlds. Still, hearing him essentially dismiss their night together as a lapse in judgment stung worse than she could have imagined. She blinked back, the burning in her eyes. "I understand, sir," she managed to say, reverting to the formal address as she gathered her clothes from the floor. Seeing her hold back tears, Bennett's facade nearly cracked. "Ayana, please," he said, stepping forward as if to reach for her, but stopping himself. "I value you as an employee. I don't want this to ruin your position here. If you're uncomfortable staying—" She straightened her spine, pride lifting her chin even as her heart crumbled. I won't make things difficult. I promise to keep everything professional. Her words were polite, but her tone had an unmistakable note of finality. If you'll excuse me, I'll go get dressed and start the morning chores. Without waiting for a response, Ayana turned and walked briskly towards her. Small room in the back of the penthouse, blanket still around her shoulders. The moment she shut the door, she pressed her back against it, letting the tears fall silently. What a fool I was, she thought bitterly. How could I let myself believe even for a moment that I belonged in his arms? In the living room, Bennett stood staring at the closed door, his heart pounding with regret. He wanted nothing more than to chase after her, to tell her he hadn't meant it the way it sounded. The tenderness of their night together was something he hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. But the enormity of what he'd done kept him frozen. He was her boss, and he had to be responsible. What if she later felt exploited, or, worse, what if the board got wind of a scandal? His company's reputation was at stake, and hers too. Bennett spotted the champagne bottle on the side table, the one he'd brought home the night before. In a surge of self-directed anger, he snatched it up. The deal it was meant to celebrate had fallen through, and now his attempt at comfort had backfired painfully. With a growl of frustration, Bennett hurled the bottle into the kitchen sink. The loud crash of shattering glass echoed, punctuating his turmoil. A short while later, dressed in a fresh blouse and slacks, Ayana emerged from her room. Her eyes were a bit red, but she held her head high. Bennett had retreated to his bedroom to shower and dress for work, and for that she was grateful. She needed time to compose herself. By the time Bennett came out, looking every bit the composed executive in a crisp new suit, Ayana was in the dining area, laying out a simple breakfast: toast, fruit, and coffee. It was part of her routine, though she doubted he had any appetite this morning. He paused in the doorway, tension hanging in the air. "Ayana," he began softly, wanting to apologize properly, to say something that would wipe that hurt look from her eyes. She did not look up from adjusting the coffee cup on the saucer. "Your breakfast is ready, Mr. Caldwell," she said evenly. "I'll be cleaning the guest bathroom if you need anything else." Her professional, distant tone made his chest ache. He knew he had put it there. "Thank you," he murmured, at a loss for how to fix what he'd broken. As Ayana moved past him to leave the room, Bennett gently caught her elbow. It was a light touch, hesitant. I really am sorry," he said, searching for her gaze. Ayana swallowed hard and finally met his eyes. "I heard you the first time," she replied, voice quiet but firm. "And I told you, I understand." She slipped her arm free from his grasp politely. "It won't happen again." With that, she left to attend her chores, leaving Bennett standing there with an apology dying on his lips. He knew he'd just lost something precious, though he couldn't fully name what it was. In that moment, as he watched her walk away, Bennett Caldwell felt more alone than ever. The days that followed were strained and silent. Ayana continued her duties with impeccable professionalism, and Bennett maintained a polite distance. On the surface, the routine in the penthouse resumed as if nothing had happened, but beneath that facade, both were hurting. Each evening, Bennett found himself hoping to catch a moment with Ayana to talk, to somehow undo the damage. Yet every time, she would finish her tasks quickly and retire to her room or leave for the night before he could summon the courage. She was courteous, even friendly in a distant way, but her warm smiles never quite reached her eyes anymore. It was driving him mad with guilt and longing. For Ayana, every moment in the penthouse had become a test of fortitude. The scent of his cologne in the halls, the sight of the sofa where they had shared that intimate night, even the sound of his voice on business calls, everything was a reminder. She kept her pain carefully hidden behind a mask of composure, determined not to let her personal heartbreak ruin her hard-earned job. But inside, she felt as if she were breaking a little more each day. After a week of this quiet torment, Ayana knew what she had to do. As much as she needed the income, her emotional well-being couldn't withstand staying in Bennett's home any longer. The final straw came when she overheard a snippet of Bennett's phone conversation one afternoon. He was speaking with someone about hiring a new hospitality staff member. Though he didn't mention her directly, Ayana took it as a sign that he anticipated her departure, or perhaps wanted to replace her. Whether it was a misunderstanding or not, it solidified her decision. Late that night, after Bennett had gone to bed, Ayana sat at the small desk in her room and penned a resignation letter. Her hand trembled as she wrote out her reasons in careful, respectful language, citing a need to attend to personal matters. She expressed gratitude for the opportunity to work for him and assured him that it was a difficult decision. Nowhere did she mention the true reason, her broken heart. Fighting back tears, Ayana placed the envelope on the kitchen counter where she knew Bennett would see it in the morning. She quietly gathered her few belongings into a single suitcase. This penthouse had never truly been home, but leaving it filled her with a sense of emptiness. So much had changed in such a short time. Before dawn, she took one last look around the quiet, luxurious space. Her eyes lingered on the living room sofa, bathed in the faint glow of city lights, the place where she had dared to believe in love for one night. Swallowing the lump in her throat, Ayana whispered a soft goodbye and slipped out of the penthouse. When morning came, Bennett found the resignation letter. He stared at the neatly folded paper with dread pooling in his stomach. As he read Ayana's polite, impersonal words, he felt a sharp pang of loss. It was happening. She was truly gone. He rushed through the penthouse, calling her name, hoping perhaps she was still around, packing or cleaning one last time. But the rooms were quiet. Her small bedroom was empty, stripped of the few touches that showed she had lived there. In the closet, only unused hangers remained. Bennett realized with a sinking heart that she had left before he even woke up, likely to avoid a difficult farewell. Clutching the resignation letter, Bennett sank onto that infamous sofa. The morning sun painted the room in pale gold, and he felt its warmth on his face as tears of frustration and regret welled in his eyes. He had been a coward about his feelings, and now he'd driven away the one person who had truly cared for him beyond his bank account or status. For the first time in years, Bennett Caldwell arrived late to the office. He couldn't focus on mergers or meetings. His thoughts kept drifting to Ayana. He wondered where she would go and whether she'd be okay. The urge to find her gnawed at him, but the letter made it clear she wanted to cut ties. Maybe it was better for her this way, he tried to reason. Away from the complications he brought into her life. That didn't make it hurt any less. Days turned into weeks. Bennett had to hire a new cleaning service through an agency. He went through 3 different companies in as many months, none of them satisfactory. They were efficient enough, but impersonal. His penthouse felt cold without Ayana's gentle presence humming through it. He missed the way she'd ask if he needed anything before she left for the day, or the soft humming of a tune under her breath as she cleaned on Sunday afternoons when she thought no one heard. It astonished him how such small things left such a void. One evening, Bennett returned home and found an old mug in the kitchen cabinet, one Ayana used often for her tea. Without thinking, he had avoided using it since she left. Seeing it now brought a fresh wave of remorse. "I'm such a fool," he muttered to himself in the empty kitchen. A fool for not holding on to the best thing that had happened to him in a long time. He made a silent promise that if he ever got a second chance, he would never push Ayana away again. Little did he know, life had a twist in store that would bind them together forever, a secret he had yet to discover. The first sign came about 6 weeks after Ayana's departure. She had moved back to her mother Diana's small house in a quiet suburb a few hours away from the city. There, surrounded by the comforting familiarity of her childhood home, she slowly mended her broken heart. She found a temporary job at a local hotel as a housekeeper, trying to save up money and plan her next steps. It was during one exhausting shift that Ayana felt a sudden wave of dizziness. She had been rushing to turn down a room, but the world tilted and dark spots danced in her vision. She sat down until the spell passed. A colleague teased her that she might be working too hard, or perhaps she was expecting. The joke lingered in Ayana's mind, long after the laughter faded. That night, unable to shake off a gnawing worry, Ayana bought a pregnancy test from a pharmacy on her way home. Her hands trembled as she followed the instructions in the bathroom she'd grown up using, heart pounding with each passing second. When the results showed positive, Ayana's world changed in an instant. She sank onto the edge of the bathtub, one hand covering her mouth as an avalanche of emotions hit her: shock, fear, and strangely, a tiny bud of joy. There was a new life growing inside her, one she instantly knew she wanted to protect with all her being. This baby was a part of her, and a part of Bennett. Tears blurred her vision as she thought about him. How would he react if he knew? Would he be angry? Accuse her of trying to trap him? Or would he want to be involved? Her last encounter with Bennett replayed in her mind. His cold apology, the broken look in his eyes when she left. Ayana pressed a hand to her belly protectively. She had to decide what was best for her child. That evening, Ayana confided in her mother, Diana. As Ayana expected, Diana was stunned by the news. Sitting at their small kitchen table, Ayana recounted the complicated story, how she had fallen for her employer and the painful way it ended. Diana listened intently, squeezing her daughter's hand as Ayana's voice broke, describing why she left. "You have to tell him," Diana said firmly, once the tale was done. "He deserves to know he's going to be a father." Ayana wiped her eyes. "I'm scared, Mama. The way we parted, he all but said that night was a mistake. What if he thinks this baby is a mistake too? I can't bear that. And what if he wants to take the baby? He's rich and powerful. I've heard stories of wealthy men fighting for custody, especially if they think the mother can't provide the same life." Diana shook her head. "But he's also the father. Maybe this is what it takes for him to realize what really matters." Ayana remained unconvinced. "Perhaps. But I need time to think. Right now, I'm still reeling." "Wow, did you see that coming? Ayana is carrying Bennett's child, and he has no idea his one night of comfort created a new life. This is where our story takes an incredible turn. If you're on the edge of your seat wondering whether Ayana will tell Bennett about the baby, or if he'll discover the truth on his own, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. You won't want to miss what happens next. Quick question for you. Do you think Ayana should tell Bennett about the pregnancy? Or is she right to protect herself and her baby from potential heartbreak? Let us know in the comments. Team tell him or team keep the secret. And if this story is touching your heart, please share it with someone who loves emotional, second-chance romance stories. Every share helps us reach more wonderful viewers like you. Now, let's fast forward to see how fate has a way of revealing even the most carefully guarded secrets. Over the next few days, Ayana wrestled with the decision. She drafted a letter to Bennett more than once, only to tear it up. She even picked up her phone to call him, but her courage failed each time before the call could connect. In the end, the hurt and pride won out. She decided not to contact Bennett about the pregnancy, at least not yet. She told herself she would revisit the idea once the baby was born, when she could think more clearly. As the months passed, Ayana focused on preparing for motherhood. She continued working at the hotel as long as she safely could, saving every penny. Her mother stood by her steadfastly, accompanying her to doctor visits and helping her convert her old bedroom into a nursery. Despite the challenges, Ayana found moments of peace, like when she felt the baby kick for the first time, or when she sang lullabies softly to her growing belly at night. However, there were difficult moments too. Sometimes Ayana would wake from a dream where Bennett was by her side, holding her and her pregnant belly, only to face the lonely reality. Each time, she would steel herself with resolve. She had made her choice, and she would make the best life she could for her child, with or without Bennett Caldwell. In a quiet hospital room on a cool spring morning, Ayana gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. The labor was long and arduous. There were moments Ayana cried out in pain and fear, wishing desperately that the baby's father was there to hold her hand. But Diana was there, and she whispered encouragement and faith into Ayana's ear, helping her push through. When the newborn's piercing cry filled the room, Ayana sobbed with relief and joy. They placed the tiny infant on her chest, and Ayana felt her heart swell larger than she ever thought possible. The baby had a shock of soft, dark curls, and when her eyes fluttered open, Ayana gasped. The baby's eyes were a deep blue-gray. Bennett's eyes. Tears streamed down Ayana's cheeks as she cradled her daughter. "Hello, little one," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Welcome to the world." The baby gurgled softly, wrapping a tiny hand around Ayana's finger. Ayana smiled through her tears. "You're so beautiful, my beautiful Zuri." She had chosen the name during a late-night talk with her mother. It meant beautiful, in Swahili, reflecting the joy and beauty the child brought into her life. Diana stroked her granddaughter's soft cheek, marveling at the bundle of new life. "She's perfect," she cooed. Yet both women noticed the telltale eye color. Diana met her daughter's gaze. "She has his eyes," she said gently. Ayana nodded, fresh tears falling. There was no denying the connection to Bennett now. Not that she ever truly doubted it. Seeing his features reflected in Zuri filled Ayana with a bittersweet ache. "I wish he could see her," she confessed softly. Diana squeezed her hand. "It's not too late to tell him, Ayana." But Ayana only kissed her baby's forehead. "One day," she whispered, both a promise and a plea, but not yet. The next few years were a whirlwind for Ayana. Being a single mother was not easy. Sleepless nights, endless diaper changes, balancing work and childcare, but it was also filled with immeasurable love. Zuri became the center of Ayana's world. With her mother's help, Ayana managed to continue working part-time at the hotel, and even took some online classes during stolen moments when Zuri slept, determined to build a better future. They lived modestly. Money was tight at times, but Ayana poured all her energy into giving Zuri a happy, stable childhood. On weekends, they would visit the local park. Zuri, a bright and precocious toddler, loved playing on the swings while Ayana gently pushed her, both of them laughing in the sunshine. Those moments made every sacrifice worth it. At night, when the house was quiet, Ayana would sometimes find herself gazing at her sleeping daughter's face. In those peaceful features, she often caught glimpses of Bennett. A certain arch of the brow, the curve of her tiny mouth when she pouted in her sleep. In those moments, Ayana's thoughts wandered back to the man she had once loved. Did he ever think of her? Would he even want to know about Zuri if he could? The uncertainty was a constant undercurrent in her heart. Still, Ayana had kept her secret. Apart from her mother and one close friend who helped babysit, no one else knew the father's identity. Ayana tried to stay informed about Bennett from afar, occasionally seeing his name in business news. His company, Caldwell Tech, continued to thrive. There were rumors linking him to various women in society pages, but nothing seemed to stick. It appeared he hadn't settled down. Sometimes, Ayana felt a guilty relief reading that he was still single. Other times, she felt a pang of sadness for him, wondering if he was truly happy with all his success, but no family to share it with. By the time Zuri was 3 years old, she was a lively child with an infectious laugh. She had her mother's warm brown skin and curly hair, but those unmistakable. Blue-grey eyes were a constant reminder of the man missing from their lives. Ayana loved her daughter fiercely and had built a quiet life in her hometown. Yet she couldn't help feeling that one day the truth would have to come out. She only prayed that when that day came, it would bring more joy than pain. Little did Ayana know, fate was already setting the stage for her and Bennett's worlds to collide once more, and this time, the secret she guarded would be impossible to hide. On a bright summer afternoon 4 years since Ayana left Bennett's penthouse, fate intervened in the most unexpected way. Bennett Caldwell found himself driving to a suburban town a couple hours from the city for a charity event. Caldwell Tech had sponsored the renovation of a community center there, and Bennett, as CEO, was invited to cut the ribbon at its grand reopening. Normally, he might have sent a representative, but something about this project had caught his interest. The center, focused on providing resources for single parents and children, a cause that oddly resonated with him as of late. The event was lively. Parents and kids from the community gathered to celebrate, along with local officials and a few corporate donors. Bennett arrived in a black car, greeted by organizers who were eager to thank him for his company's contribution. As he stepped out, he adjusted the collar of his tailored shirt, and surveyed the cheerful crowd. It was a welcome change from stuffy boardrooms and sterile corporate functions. Unbeknownst to him, Ayana was also at the community center that day. Since Zuri's birth, Ayana had become involved with the center's programs, first as a participant in a parenting class, and later as a volunteer helping other young mothers. The center had been a lifeline for her, and when they asked if she would help with organizing the reopening event, she gladly agreed. She spent the morning helping set up booths, arranging chairs, and making sure the children's play area was safe. By midday, Ayana stood near the refreshment table, pouring cups of lemonade for a group of kids. Zuri played nearby with a couple of other children, giggling as they chased each other on the grass. Ayana kept a watchful eye on her daughter while managing her duties. Bennett had just arrived and was waiting in the side tent when he heard his cue. That's when she heard the announcement over the small sound system, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the man whose generous donation made this day possible, Mr. Bennett Caldwell." The name hit Ayana like a thunderbolt. She nearly dropped the pitcher of lemonade. Her heart started hammering in her chest. Surely it had to be a coincidence, perhaps someone else. Named Bennett Caldwell. But as polite applause rose from the crowd, Ayana's gaze was inexorably drawn to the front of the center. There he was. Bennett stood on a small stage area beside the local mayor, looking almost exactly as she remembered, yet somehow even more distinguished. His hair was slightly shorter, and he had a confident but humble smile as he waved to the crowd. Ayana felt her mouth go dry. After years of trying to forget those piercing grey eyes, she saw them again as he turned to accept the microphone for a short speech. Ayana's first instinct was to retreat before he could notice her. Her feet felt glued to the ground, shock rooting her in place. The world seemed to narrow to just him, the sound of his voice echoing across the lawn as he spoke about the importance of community, his hope that the center would change lives. She knew she had to get away. If Bennett saw her here with Zuri, panic and longing flooded her simultaneously. What do I do? She thought frantically. But before Ayana could slip off, a small hand tugged at her skirt. "Mummy, can I have a cookie?" Zuri asked, her bright eyes dancing with excitement. She had no idea her father was just yards away, addressing the crowd. Ayana looked down at her daughter's innocent face and made a split-second decision. "Of course, sweetie. Let's go get one from the table on the other side of the playground," she said, forcing a calm smile. That table was farther from where Bennett stood. She scooped up Zuri in her arms, intending to put as much distance as possible. However, as she turned, fate played its hand again. The mayor's speech concluded, and people began to mingle. Bennett stepped down from the stage, immediately encircled by a few well-wishers and curious parents, as he politely navigated the conversations, thanking people for coming. His eyes roamed the crowd and locked onto a familiar figure. He saw Ayana in profile first, the graceful curve of her face as she held a little girl on her hip. For a moment, Bennett thought he was imagining things. He blinked, and his heart leapt into his throat. Ayana? It couldn't be. Here, of all places. But he'd recognize her anywhere, even after all this time. "Excuse me," he murmured distractedly to the person speaking to him, and, without another thought, he started striding across the lawn toward her. His pulse raced with a mix of excitement and anxiety. What would he say? Ayana felt his gaze before she saw him. Like a magnetic pull, she lifted her eyes and found Bennett walking straight toward her, the crowd parting slightly in his wake. Her breath caught. There was no escaping now. For a second, they simply stared at each other across a short distance, two worlds colliding once more. Bennett was the first to speak. "Ayana," he called, voice colored with disbelief and a tentative joy. There was no point in fleeing. Heart pounding, Ayana gently set Zuri down and turned fully to face him. "Hello, Bennett," she replied softly, unsure if he could even hear her over the ambient chatter and the blood rushing in her ears. He came to a stop a few feet in front of her. Up close, Bennett's face showed a myriad of emotions: astonishment, relief, uncertainty. Ayana instinctively stepped back, and the movement drew his attention to the child now clutching. Her hand, partially hiding behind her legs as children often do with strangers. Bennett's eyes flickered to the little girl, and he offered a polite smile, assuming she was just one of the many kids at the event. "Ayana, I can't believe it's you. How have you been?" he said, tearing his gaze back to Ayana. There was so much he wanted to ask, but words failed him. Seeing her now, he realized just how much he'd missed her. "I've been—" Ayana began, her throat dry. How could she possibly sum up the past years in a sentence? "Well, I've been well. And you? You seem to be doing great." She nodded towards the banner on the community center thanking Caldwell Tech. Bennett shrugged lightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "The company's doing well, yes, but He trailed off, noticing that Ayana seemed nervous. Her posture was guarded. Did she not want to see him? Before he could formulate another thought, Zuri peeked out from behind her. Mother, curious about the handsome stranger who knew her mommy's name. Bennett glanced down again, and this time took in details: the child's dark, curly hair, her complexion a warm tan that suggested a mixed heritage. And then he saw her eyes. Blue-grey eyes that were an uncanny mirror of his own. Time slowed as Bennett's mind connected the dots. His gaze snapped back to Ayana, shock evident. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out at first. 1,000 questions swirled, but one managed to escape in a hushed, almost breathless whisper. "Ayana, who is this?" Ayana's heart nearly stopped at the expression on Bennett's face. It was a mixture of wonder and dawning realization that she both longed for and dreaded. She placed a protective hand on Zuri's shoulder. The little girl looked up at her mother, sensing the tension. Ayana knelt down, bringing Zuri forward gently. Her voice shook slightly as she introduced them. "Bennett, this is Zuri. My daughter." She felt her pulse thundering, as she deliberately used the word "my," though. Every fiber of her being knew the truth she was on the verge of revealing. Bennett crouched automatically to be on eye level with the child. His eyes brimmed with emotion as he managed a soft greeting. "Hello, Zuri." The girl offered a small, shy smile and tucked her face against Ayana's arm, not fully grasping the significance of the moment. His voice almost failed him as he looked up at Ayana, searching her face for confirmation of the impossible. "Our daughter?" he asked in a barely audible voice, just for her to hear. Ayana bit her lip, tears already gathering in her eyes. There was no use pretending otherwise, not when Zuri's eyes gave it all away. She nodded, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "Yes," she whispered. "Our daughter." Bennett rocked back as if the air had been punched from his lungs. He slowly stood up, eyes wide and glassy. For a moment, Ayana feared he might be angry, that he would cause a scene. But then she saw it. A single tear slipped down his cheek too, his guard completely shattered. He let out a shaky breath, trying to process. "I have a daughter," he whispered, almost to himself. Then his face crumpled with profound regret and tenderness as he looked at Ayana and Zuri. "All this time, why didn't you—" His voice broke, unable to finish the question that hung heavy with hurt. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ayana felt a sob rising in her throat at his tone. Zuri, sensing her mother's distress, wrapped her little arms around Ayana's leg, holding her. Ayana stroked her daughter's hair for comfort and drew a fortifying breath. "I thought it was for the best. I was scared, Bennett." Bennett rubbed a hand over his face, trying to compose himself. They were starting to draw a few curious glances from others nearby, so he quickly nodded towards a quieter corner of the lawn. "Can we talk, please?" he asked, almost pleading. Ayana hesitated, then agreed softly. "All right." She lifted Zuri into her arms. The girl was getting big for it, but Ayana held her close like a shield and comfort both. They moved a little away from the crowd, near a bench under a tree. Bennett was visibly struggling to keep his emotions in check. He had dreamed of seeing Ayana again, but never in his wildest dreams did he imagine he'd also meet a child, his child. The moment they had a semblance of privacy, Bennett turned to Ayana, his expression a storm of sadness and longing. "Why, Ayana? Why didn't you tell me about her?" His voice was gentle, but the pain was evident. Ayana felt tears welling again. She met Bennett's eyes, trying to convey years of turmoil in a single glance. "When I found out I was pregnant, we weren't exactly on speaking terms," she began quietly. "I was afraid. Things ended so badly between us. I didn't think you'd want a baby with me, and I worried you might try to take her away, given our differences." Bennett looked stricken. "You thought I would take your baby? Our baby?" He shook his head vehemently. "Ayana, I would never." He paused, guilt flooding him, as he realized how his rejection must have made her feel. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I made you believe I wouldn't care, but that was never true. I was a coward and a fool." Zuri watched the exchange quietly from Ayana's arms, eyes darting between the adults. Bennett offered the little girl a tentative smile through his tears. "Hi, Zuri," he said softly. I'm Bennett. I'm someone who knew your mommy a while ago." Zuri looked at him with curiosity. "You're making my mommy cry," she said, reaching up to touch a tear on Ayana's cheek with concern. Both adults managed a teary laugh at that. Ayana kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'm okay, sweetie," she assured. These are happy tears, I promise." Bennett swallowed hard. He longed to hold his child, but he didn't want to scare her or overstep with Ayana. His hands trembled slightly as he spoke to Ayana, eyes full of sincerity. "I know I have no right to ask, but may I hold her?" Ayana studied him for a long moment. She saw the yearning in his face. A father desperately wanting to connect with a daughter he just learned existed. Despite all the fear and uncertainty, she slowly nodded. "It's okay with me. Zuri, honey," she addressed her little girl softly. "This is Bennett. He's actually your daddy." Zuri's eyes widened at the word daddy. She had seen other kids with fathers and had asked about hers before. Ayana had always told her that her daddy lived in the city, that he was a good man who didn't know about her yet. It seems today that was changing. Bennett let out a small broken sound when he heard Ayana say the words. He held out his arms uncertainly. "Hi, Zuri," he repeated gently. "I'm your dad. I'm so happy to meet you." The little girl looked to her mother for assurance. Ayana gave her an encouraging nod and a watery smile. Carefully, Ayana transferred Zuri into Bennett's waiting arms. Bennett cradled his daughter for the first time, astonishment and love washing over him. Zuri was real, warm, and she was his. He studied her tiny face, seeing up close those familiar eyes, the delicate features that were a blend of him and Ayana. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, voice quavering. Zuri giggled a little, still shy but not rejecting this stranger who held her so gently and looked at her like she was a treasure. In that moment, Bennett felt a powerful emotion swell inside him, a fierce protective love unlike anything he had experienced. Tears slipped freely down his face as he held Zuri, and he looked up at Ayana with gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you," he breathed. "Thank you for our daughter. And I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I wasn't there for both of you." Ayana placed a hand on his arm. "I did what I thought was right at the time," she said softly. "Maybe I was wrong, I don't know, but I'm sorry too. I never wanted to hurt you by keeping her secret. I was just scared what might happen." Bennett nodded, understanding even though it hurt that he had missed so much. "You had every right to be cautious after how I acted. I put my pride and fear first, but I promise you, Ayana, I would have been there if I'd known. I want to be here now. If you'll let me." Ayana searched his face, and all she saw was earnest hope and remorse. Before she could respond, Zuri decided to speak up, her tiny hands reaching toward Bennett's face to wipe a tear curiously. "Why you cry, Daddy?" she asked, tilting her head. The word Daddy from Zuri's lips made Bennett smile even as he cried. He chuckled softly. "I'm crying because I'm very happy, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy. I'm happy I got to meet you." Zuri seemed to consider this. Then, in a tender move that made both adults melt, she wrapped her small arms around Bennett's neck in a hug. Bennett closed his eyes, holding her close, as if afraid this was all a dream and she'd vanish if he let go. Ayana watched father and daughter embrace for the first time and felt something heal inside her that she hadn't realized was still broken. Despite all her fears, seeing them together just felt right. In the hours that followed their reunion, Bennett barely left Ayana and Zuri's side. The charity event carried on around them, but the three were in their own world. Bennett was reluctant to part from his daughter, now that he'd found her. When the formal ceremony ended, he gently suggested, "There's a park across the street. Maybe we could all go sit and talk more. I'll understand if you need to leave, but—" He trailed off, eyes pleading. Ayana agreed that some privacy would be good. She was overwhelmed herself and needed time to process everything with him. They informed one of the organizers that Ayana had to step away, and Bennett promised to return later for any remaining duties. Soon, they found themselves on a quiet bench under the shade of oak trees in the park. Zuri sat happily on Bennett's lap now, surprisingly at ease with her new father. Bennett had a look of pure joy as he listened to the little girl babble about her favorite cartoon character and how she loved strawberry ice cream. Ayana watched them interact with a mix of happiness and anxiety. This was the moment she'd both dreaded and hoped for, and it was going better than she had dreamed. Still, the future felt uncertain. After some playtime with Zuri, Bennett insisted on pushing her on the swings, eliciting delighted giggles. The tired toddler eventually fell asleep in her father's arms, clutching a small doll she'd brought along. Bennett took off his suit jacket to drape it over her like a blanket. The sight of Bennett holding their sleeping child, gently rocking her, nearly brought Ayana to tears again. With Zuri snoozing peacefully, Bennett finally broached the serious topic that loomed. "Ayana, I meant what I said. I want to be part of her life. And, if you'll allow it, part of yours again too." He spoke softly to not wake Zuri, but his words were fervent. "I know I have no right to ask for anything. I messed up so badly back then. But please tell me how I can fix this." Ayana looked down at her hands, which were twisting nervously in her lap. "I honestly don't know," she admitted. "Everything is different now. My whole life has been about Zuri since I left, letting you into her life, into our life. It's a big change." He nodded, gaze earnest. "I understand. You have every reason to be cautious. I just discovered I have a daughter. I realize it's a huge adjustment for you as well. I don't want to disrupt what you've built, but I also don't want to miss another day of seeing her grow up." "What exactly are you asking for?" Ayana said quietly, lifting her eyes to meet his. "I need to know your intentions, Bennett." Bennett took a breath. This was it, the moment to lay everything out. "I want to support you both, whatever way you need. Financially, of course. You shouldn't have to worry about money for Zuri's upbringing or schooling." He saw Ayana's expression tighten slightly at that and quickly continued. "And more than that, I want to be there. I want to spend time with her, get to know who she is, and for her to know me." He hesitated, then added with a vulnerable crack in his voice, "I missed her. First words, her first steps. I don't want to miss anything else, Ayana. I can't change the past, but maybe I can be there for the future, if you'll let me." Ayana felt the sincerity in his plea. This was everything she had secretly hoped he would say, if he ever found out. And yet, hearing it still terrified her. "Bennett," she murmured, "I never wanted to deny you the chance to be her father. I was just so afraid then, afraid you might take her or that we'd end up in a bitter fight. I didn't want her to ever feel unwanted." He flinched at the word, pain crossing his face. "Unwanted? God, Ayana, I would have wanted her. I would have—" He stopped, realizing hypothetical promises meant little in hindsight. "No, you're right. My actions made you think that. I'm so sorry." She reached out and gently touched his arm. "I'm not saying this to blame you. I'm trying to explain. I didn't tell you because I thought I was protecting Zuri. But now, seeing you with her," she managed a tremulous smile, "no matter what happened between us, I can see you love her already. And she deserves to know her father. Bennett's eyes lit with gratitude and a cautious hope. "So, you'll let me be in her life?" "Yes," Ayana nodded, emotion thick in her throat. "We'll take it slow, but yes, she should have a father." She then added softly, "And you. You should have the chance to be the dad you never had." At that, Bennett's composure nearly broke again. He carefully shifted Zuri in his arms and reached for Ayana's hand. "Thank you. You won't regret it, I swear. I'll do whatever it takes to prove I'm worthy of her and of you." Ayana's heart skipped. The warmth of his hand around hers felt so natural. For a moment, they simply sat there, connected by their hands and the sleeping child between them. It felt like a fragile semblance of family. Eventually, practical matters had to be discussed. Bennett asked a flurry of questions about Zuri's birthday, her favorite, foods, her habits, eagerly absorbing every detail Ayana could provide. He quietly marveled at how much he saw of both of them in the little girl's personality. Ayana, in turn, learned that Bennett had indeed remained single, pouring himself into work perhaps as a way to forget his loneliness. He admitted that no relationship ever felt right after she left. As evening approached, Bennett didn't want them to part without setting a plan. "I have to go back to the city tonight, but can I see you both again tomorrow, or as soon as possible?" he asked. "I could drive back first thing in the morning, or you could come visit. I'll send a car. Whatever is easier for you." Ayana thought for a moment. Her mother would be wondering about her and Zuri by now, and truthfully, she needed a little time to think through everything that happened today. "Tomorrow might be too soon for a visit to the city," she said. "Give me a day or two. We can come this weekend, maybe? I'd like to have my mom around when we sort out details. She's been my rock through all this. And she'll want to see you too." Bennett nodded, understanding. Of course, this weekend then. He realized that meant a few days of waiting, but after years apart, a couple days felt bearable, and he also knew Ayana deserved to set the pace now. They exchanged phone numbers, a simple act that felt momentous given how long they'd been out of touch. Bennett insisted on walking Ayana and Zuri back to her car. Zuri woke up as they transferred her to the car seat, and she sleepily asked if Daddy was coming home with them. Ayana glanced at Bennett, unsure what to say, but he handled it gently. He brushed a kiss on Zuri's forehead, marveling at how natural it felt to do so. "Not tonight, little one, but I'll see you very soon, okay? Maybe in a couple days. Be good for your mommy." Zuri nodded drowsily, accepting the answer. "Okay. Love you, Daddy," she mumbled, already half asleep again. Bennett's breath caught. It was the first time he'd ever heard those words directed at him, and it took all his strength not to break down. I love you too, Zuri," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Ayana's eyes filled at the exchange. She gently squeezed Bennett's hand. "We'll call when we're ready to visit, all right?" He squeezed back, reluctant to let go. "I'll be waiting." And Ayana, "Thank you, again, for giving me a chance." She managed a soft smile. "You earned it today." With that, Bennett watched them drive off, his heart fuller than it had been in a long time, and yet aching for their absence already. He realized he had a lot to prepare. He wanted everything to be perfect when Ayana and Zuri came to his world. Over the next few days, Bennett was a man on a mission. He informed his inner circle, his personal lawyer, his estate manager, that he had a daughter and that he intended to formally acknowledge her. This included updating his will and setting up a trust fund for Zuri's future. He didn't want Ayana to worry about financial security ever again. However, one of those phone calls unintentionally sowed a seed of misunderstanding. Ayana had agreed to bring Zuri to Bennett's penthouse that coming Saturday. In the meantime, Bennett and she spoke every night on the phone, sometimes with Zuri, chiming in sleepily to tell her daddy about her day, much to Bennett's delight. On Friday evening, Ayana and Zuri arrived in the city to stay at a hotel. Ayana felt it was too soon to stay at Bennett's place, an intimacy she wasn't ready for. Bennett, eager and anxious, called Ayana to check in. After making sure they were comfortable, He told her he'd drop by in the morning to take them out for breakfast. Later that night, Ayana stepped out of the hotel room to get ice from the machine down the hall. To her surprise, she heard Bennett's voice coming from around the corner near the elevators, talking animatedly on his phone. Curious, she watched from a distance. She could faintly hear bits of his conversation drifting up. It sounded serious. "I don't care about the cost. Just make sure it's ironclad," Bennett was saying. He paused, presumably listening to the other person. "Yes, full custody if it comes to that. I want my rights as her father protected. Prepare whatever paperwork needed." Ayana's blood ran cold. Full custody? Paperwork? Was Bennett planning to try to take Zuri away? Her heart pounded in her ears. Had she been naive to trust him so quickly? Ayana retreated into the room, panic rising. Memories of her worst fears flooded back. Images of courtroom battles and losing her daughter. Zuri was sleeping soundly in the bed, unaware of her mother's turmoil. When Bennett rang their room early the next morning, excited to see them, Ayana answered the door with a guarded expression. She had barely slept after hearing that snippet of his conversation. Her mind raced with possibilities. She told herself there might be an explanation, but the dread lingered. "Good morning," Bennett greeted cheerfully, but his smile faltered when he saw Ayana's tense face. "Is everything all right?" Ayana took a breath, deciding it was best to confront this head-on. "Bennett, I overheard you on the phone last night, outside the hotel. Were you talking about custody of Zuri?" Bennett's eyes widened in surprise, then realization. "Ayana, She held up a hand, keeping her voice low so as not to wake Zuri inside. "Please, just be honest with me. Are you planning to take legal action regarding Zuri? You mentioned full custody." Bennett's face fell with regret. He stepped back, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'm sorry you heard it like that. It sounds terrible out of context." He looked into her eyes pleadingly. "I was talking to my lawyer, yes, but not to take Zuri from you, never that." "Then what were you doing?" Ayana asked, arms crossed protectively. "I was updating my will and legally acknowledging Zuri as my heir," he said gently. "And I was asking about establishing paternity officially. The full custody part. My lawyer was just advising me on what my rights could be if, heaven forbid, anything went wrong. I told him I didn't foresee any fight with you, but he was being thorough." Bennett ran a hand through his hair, frustrated at himself. "I should have told you I was handling the legal side, but I didn't want to overwhelm you. I see now that hiding it only made you worry exactly what I never wanted you to worry about." Ayana searched his face. He seemed sincere, and it did sound like the kind of due diligence an excited father might do, not a scheming move to snatch her child. Her tensed posture eased slightly. "You should have discussed it with me," she said quietly, hurt still evident. "You're right. I'm sorry," he said, stepping closer. "I promise you, Ayana, I have zero intention of separating Zuri from you. You are her mother, and you've done an amazing job raising her. I want to hold up my responsibilities as her father. That includes legal ones, like making sure if something happened to me, she's taken care of." Ayana felt a flush of shame for assuming the worst, but her wariness had been rooted in her very real fears. She nodded slowly. "I understand. I'm sorry for jumping to conclusions, but you have to see why I panicked." He gently took her hands in his. I know I have to earn your trust, and I want you to be involved in every decision regarding Zuri, okay? No more unilateral moves, even well-intentioned ones. We're in this together, if you agree." Together. The word warmed Ayana, despite the morning chill in the hallway. "All right," she conceded softly. "Together." A small smile returned to Bennett's face. "Thank you. I promise, no more lawyer calls without looping you in." He hesitated, then asked, "Are we still on for breakfast?" "I was thinking pancakes." Zuri mentioned on the phone she loves pancakes with strawberries. Ayana couldn't help but smile at that. His eagerness to learn their daughter's favorites was endearing. "Yes, we're still on." "Give me a few minutes to get her ready." Within the hour, the little family was seated at a cozy cafe a few blocks from Bennett's penthouse. Over stacks of pancakes and fresh fruit, the misunderstanding of the morning faded away. Zuri gleefully smeared syrup on her chin, making both her parents laugh. Bennett couldn't recall a happier breakfast in his life. Each moment with Ayana and Zuri felt precious and grounding, confirming to him that he would do whatever it took to keep them in his life permanently. But more challenges were on the horizon. News of Bennett's newfound family had quietly begun to spread among a few in his circle. By the time they finished breakfast, one of Bennett's senior board members had sent a discreet email requesting a meeting. Word had, somehow, gotten out that Bennett Caldwell had a child, and questions were looming about how this would affect the company's image and Bennett's focus. There was also Vivian, who had seen a social media post from the charity event where someone had snapped a picture of Bennett holding a little girl with Ayana by his side. Vivian's curiosity and jealousy were instantly piqued. For now, however, Bennett pushed those concerns aside. He spent the rest of that day with Ayana and Zuri, taking them to the city aquarium where Zuri squealed at the sight of colorful fish and jellyfish floating like living rainbows. Ayana watched Bennett lift Zuri up so she could press her hands to the glass of the huge shark tank, and her heart swelled seeing them bond. Despite the morning's hiccup, Bennett was proving to be a doting father and considerate co-parent. Later that day at Bennett's penthouse, while Zuri napped in the afternoon, Bennett took the opportunity to talk privately with Ayana. He led her to the study, the very room where years ago she had carefully arranged his books and first caught his attention. The memories made them both smile wistfully. "I have something for you," Bennett said, opening a desk drawer. He pulled out an envelope and handed it to Ayana. Inside was a check, a very large check. Ayana's eyes widened and she immediately shook her head, trying to hand it back. "Bennett, no, I don't need this." He gently closed her fingers around it. "Please. It's not what you think. It's not me trying to pay you off or anything like that. This is just a small portion of what I should have been providing all along for Zuri's care. Call it back child support, if you will." Ayana looked at the amount. It was enough to ease her financial burdens significantly and secure Zuri's needs for years. "I appreciate the sentiment, but we've been managing okay." Bennett stepped closer, his expression earnest. "Ayana, I know you have. You've done amazingly on your own. But you don't have to do it alone anymore. Let me contribute. It's for Zuri's future, maybe for her college fund or anything she needs. If you don't want to use it for yourself, put it in an account for her. I want to do right by both of you." Tears pricked Ayana's eyes. She nodded, accepting the check with a small sigh. "All right. For her sake, thank you," he said softly. He hesitated, then continued. "Also, I want you to know, I told my mother about Zuri." Ayana's eyebrows rose. She remembered Bennett mentioning his mother had worked hard to raise him, but she had never met the woman. How did she take it? A warm smile spread on Bennett's face. "She's thrilled. You might not know, but you gave her a grandchild, her first. She wants to meet Zuri as soon as possible, and she wants to see you too. I think she might feel like she already knows you, because I told her about you after you left." He rubbed his neck, a bit sheepish. "I was a mess when you left, and I ended up telling my mom everything. She actually scolded me for letting you go." Ayana was touched. The idea that his mother had sided with her when she didn't even know her meant a lot. "Maybe we can arrange a visit with her soon," she said, smiling. "I'd like that," Bennett replied, relief in his voice that she was open to it. Just then, their quiet moment was interrupted by Zuri's sleepy voice calling, "Mommy? Daddy?" They both turned to see Zuri standing in the study doorway, rubbing her eyes, her curls adorably mussed from her nap. Bennett immediately went to her, scooping her up. "I'm here, princess," he said gently, the pet name slipping out naturally. Ayana joined them, and they stood together, a little family, fitting together as if they'd been that way all along. Though challenges still lay ahead, Bennett would have to answer questions from his board and the public. Ayana would have to navigate sharing her daughter after years of doing it all herself. In that moment, they all felt a sense of hope and unity. They were no longer three separate souls burdened by secrets and regret. They were together, ready to face whatever came next. In the weeks that followed, Bennett, Ayana, and Zuri fell into a new rhythm of life. Bennett traveled to see them as often as he could, and Ayana began bringing Zuri to the city on weekends. With each passing day, Bennett and Ayana grew closer again. There were lingering looks that lasted a bit too long, gentle touches as they passed each other, and late-night conversations after Zuri was asleep, where they laughed and reminisced like old friends. However, amid the joy, they also faced challenges. When Bennett's company quietly released a press statement acknowledging that their CEO had a young daughter, it caused a stir in the media. The narrative spun it positively, highlighting Bennett's support for the community. Center for Single Parents, the very event where fate reunited them. This helped mitigate most public criticism. Many people found the story heartwarming, a successful man discovering and embracing his secret child. Yet, not everyone was pleased. At an upcoming corporate gala, Bennett decided it was time to formally introduce Ayana, and privately, Zuri, to some of his colleagues and board members. It would be Ayana's first appearance by his side in his high society world, a step he insisted on to show he was serious about his family. Ayana was nervous, but Bennett assured her that he would be with her every step of the way. Bennett checked his jacket pocket for the 10th time, feeling the small velvet box he'd been carrying for days, waiting for the right moment to propose to Ayana. The gala was an elegant affair at a 5-star hotel ballroom filled with influential business figures and their spouses. Bennett arrived proudly with Ayana on his arm, looking stunning in an emerald evening gown he had bought for her after much protest from her. He had won by claiming it was a gift, not a handout. Zuri stayed at home with Bennett's mother, happily having a grandma night. As they mingled, Bennett introduced Ayana to key people as the mother of my child, and in more intimate circles as someone very special to me. Some faces showed surprise when they learned Ayana wasn't from a wealthy family or an executive background, but most greeted her politely. Ayana held her head high, determined not to let imposter syndrome get the better of her. She reminded herself she had every right to be there, just as much as anyone. Halfway through the evening, however, an all-too-familiar voice sent a chill down Ayana's spine. "Well, if it isn't Bennett Caldwell and his +1, came a saccharine tone from behind them. Bennett and Ayana turned to find Vivian Marshall standing there, draped in a sparkling silver gown and flanked by a couple of her high society friends. Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes as she gave Ayana a once-over that was anything but friendly. "Vivian," Bennett greeted coolly, instinctively stepping closer to Ayana. "I didn't expect to see you here." Vivian shrugged, lifting a champagne flute to her glossy lips. "It's a significant event on the social calendar, darling. Of course I'm here." Her eyes slid to Ayana again, fake sympathy coloring her voice. "And who is this? Your nanny? Oh wait, I heard the news. She was your maid, wasn't she?" Ayana felt heat rising to her cheeks in a mix of embarrassment and anger. She opened her mouth to respond, but Bennett beat her to it. "Watch your tone, Vivian," he said sharply. A few nearby attendees began to take interest in the tension unfolding. "Ayana is here as my partner, and I expect her to be treated with respect." Vivian raised an eyebrow, a cruel little smile playing on her lips. "Relax, Bennett. I'm just surprised. Last I recall, domestic staff weren't exactly your type." Her gaze flicked to Ayana's elegant gown and manicured appearance. "I suppose a makeover and a billionaire's arm can do wonders for a girl's status." Ayana's fists clenched by her side, but she forced herself to remain calm. She'd faced far worse challenges in life than a catty socialite. Still, the words stung, dredging up old insecurities about not belonging in Bennett's world. Bennett, however, was livid. He gently released Ayana's arm and stepped forward, his voice low and intense. "Vivian, you will not speak about Ayana that way. Not now, not ever. Yes, she worked for me, and I deeply regret how that ended. But that's between us. Ayana is an incredible woman, intelligent, kind, and stronger than you could ever imagine. The fact that you think her worth is determined by her job or pedigree only shows how shallow you are. Vivian's face reddened at the public dressing down. A few gasps could be heard from eavesdroppers, but Bennett wasn't done. If you must know, he continued loudly enough for those around to hear clearly, Ayana is also the mother of my child, the child I consider the biggest blessing of my life. I love my daughter, and I have tremendous respect and admiration for Ayana for raising her so well. I won't tolerate anyone, especially not someone who supposedly once cared for me, looking down on the mother of my kid. Ayana's heart thundered as she heard Bennett's impassioned defense. Vivian looked positively scandalized, but she sneered, "Well, isn't that noble? Playing house with the help, are we? What's next? A wedding announcement?" Bennett didn't miss a beat. "Perhaps it is," he said, his voice rising with conviction. He turned to Ayana, eyes shining not with anger now, but with a fierce tenderness. In front of everyone, he reached for her hand. "Ayana, I know this is sudden, but—" He got down on one knee, eliciting a collective gasp from the gathering crowd. Ayana's breath caught. Was this really happening? Her vision blurred with tears as she watched Bennett pull a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. He must have been carrying it, maybe hoping for the right time. "Ayana," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I have made many mistakes in my life, but loving you and our daughter is not one of them. These past weeks seeing you, again, seeing what an amazing mother and woman you are, has shown me what I truly want in life. I want our family together. I want to stand by you every day and never let you go again." He opened the box, revealing a delicate diamond ring. A collective silence fell around them as onlookers held their breath. "Will you marry me?" Bennett asked, gazing up at her hopefully. "Not because of pressure or image, or even just for Zuri, but because I am in love with you. I have been for a long time, even when I was too blind to admit it. You are my heart, Ayana." Tears spilled freely down Ayana's cheeks. All her life she had dreamed of finding someone who would love her truly and stand up for her. Here was that man, once lost, now found again. She could see in his eyes that he meant every word. For a moment, she forgot about Vivian, the crowd, all of it. Ayana smiled through her tears and nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course I'll marry you, Bennett." A cheer erupted among the onlookers as Bennett slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, wrapping Ayana in a joyful embrace. Ayana laughed through sobs of happiness, and Bennett kissed her. A tender, yet passionate kiss that left no doubt in anyone's mind about his feelings. Vivian scowled and muttered something inaudible before slinking away, thoroughly defeated. As applause filled the ballroom, Bennett rested his forehead against Ayana's and murmured, "Thank you. You've made me the happiest man alive." Ayana cupped his face lovingly. "You fought for me, for us. I never expected that. And I'm so glad. I love you, Bennett." "I love you too, Ayana," he whispered, sealing the declaration with another kiss. That night marked a turning point. Any remaining skepticism among Bennett's peers evaporated as they witnessed his devotion. More importantly, it was the final healing of the wounds between Bennett and Ayana. They were no longer CEO and Maid, nor estranged co-parents. They were two people who had found their way back to each other and to love. In the days that followed, Bennett and Ayana told Zuri about their engagement. In a sweet, simple way, Daddy gave Mommy a special ring. The child was just happy to see her parents together and smiling. Bennett's mother cried tears of joy at the news, immediately doting on Ayana as if she were a daughter of her own. Even the Caldwell Tech Board, initially anxious, came around when they realized. A stable family actually made their CEO more relatable and grounded. Bennett and Ayana decided on a small, heartfelt wedding a couple of months later. Not a splashy society event, but an intimate ceremony in the very community center where they reunited, as a nod to destiny bringing them full circle. Zuri was the flower girl, stealing the show in a frilly dress as she scattered petals and insisted on holding both Mommy and Daddy's hands during the vows. When Bennett and Ayana spoke their vows, there wasn't a dry eye among the guests composed of close friends. a few supportive colleagues, and the community center staff and families who had become Ayana's friends. "I take you as you are, and I offer myself in return," Bennett vowed, voice trembling with emotion as he looked at Ayana. "I promise to be a husband worthy of your love, and a father Zuri can be proud of. I will cherish and protect our family. Always." Ayana's tears shimmered as she replied, "I stood alone for a long time, but you found me again and showed me I didn't have to. I promise to trust you, to stand by you through every storm, and to fill our home with love and laughter. I'm so grateful we found our way back to each other. I love you, and I always will." With a gentle kiss, they sealed their union, and little Zuri clapped exuberantly, yelling, "Yay, Mummy and Daddy!" to everyone's laughter. They were finally a family in every sense, bound by love, trust, and a shared future. 2 years later, the Caldwell household was filled with a kind of laughter and chaos only a young family could bring. The morning sun streamed into the cozy breakfast nook of their suburban home. They had moved from the penthouse to a house with a yard, seeking a more family-friendly space. Ayana sat at the table sipping coffee while watching Bennett attempt to spoon-feed oatmeal to a squirming 1-year-old boy in a high chair. Little Caleb, an energetic 1-year-old with a mop of brown curls, was in a feisty mood, babbling and banging a rubber spoon on his tray. Oatmeal flecked Bennett's shirt and even his cheek, but he was grinning ear to ear. From the hallway, a now 5-year-old Zuri bounded in, already dressed in her kindergarten uniform. "Mommy, Daddy, I tied my shoes all by myself," she announced proudly. Ayana beamed, opening her arms as Zuri rushed in for a morning hug. "That's wonderful, sweetie. You're getting so big." Bennett turned and scooped Zuri up with his free arm, mindful of the baby in the high chair. He planted a playful kiss on her cheek, making her giggle. "Good job, princess. Looks like you're ready for school." In these simple, everyday moments, Bennett often marveled at how much his life had transformed. Not long ago, his mornings were lonely, filled only with emails and black coffee. Now, he wouldn't trade this slightly messy, love-filled breakfast scene for all the corporate successes in the world. After Ayana and Bennett got married, they had decided to grow their family. Caleb's arrival had been a joyous occasion. Bennett had been by Ayana's side through the whole pregnancy, doting on her. At every turn, a stark contrast to the lonely journey she'd had with Zuri. It healed something deep inside both of them, experiencing the journey to parenthood together as a team. Bennett's company continued to thrive, but he set firmer boundaries for work-life balance. Even his board noticed that a happier CEO made for a healthier company culture. He championed family-friendly policies at Caldwell Tech, inspired by his own experiences. Ayana, for her part, went back to school part-time and earned a degree in early childhood education. She had found her passion in helping young parents and children at the community center, and now she was on track to eventually run programs there. After dropping Zuri at school, Bennett and Ayana took a stroll through a nearby park with Caleb dozing in a stroller. It was a routine they cherished whenever Bennett went into work a bit late. Walking hand in hand, they reflected on their journey. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" Bennett asked softly, giving Ayana's hand a squeeze. Ayana leaned her head on his shoulder as they walked. "All the time. Sometimes I still have to pinch myself to believe this is real, that we're here together after everything." Bennett slowed to a stop under the shade of an oak tree, coincidentally. The scenery not unlike that day in the park where he first held Zuri. He turned to face Ayana, tilting her chin up gently. "I think fate had a plan for us all along," he said. "We had some detours, some heartaches, but it led us here. And I've never been more grateful for anything in my life." Ayana smiled, eyes shining with love. "Me neither. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it." They shared a tender kiss, the kind filled with the comfort and promise of years of trust built between them. Pulling back, Ayana added with a playful glint, "Though I do sometimes wonder how fate would have worked it out if we hadn't both ended up at that community center that day." Bennett chuckled. "Oh, I'd have found you eventually," he teased. I told you, I tried hiring 3 different cleaning services after you left and fired them. All. Deep down, I was searching for an excuse to come looking for the one that got away. Ayana laughed. Well, I'm glad you didn't give up. They continued their walk, both quietly reflecting on the lessons they learned on their path to this happy present. Bennett had learned that success and wealth mean nothing without someone to share them with, and that being vulnerable enough to love and be loved was the greatest success of all. Ayana learned that fear and pride should never stand in the way of honesty, and that sometimes taking a chance on forgiveness could lead to unimaginable happiness. Most of all, they both learned that family, no matter how unexpectedly it forms, is a treasure worth fighting for. As they headed back home, Caleb began to stir and fuss. Ayana gently lifted him from the stroller, and Bennett made silly faces that quickly turned the baby's cries into laughter. They exchanged a knowing glance. This was their beautiful, imperfect, wonderful life, built on trust, love, and the hard-earned wisdom of their past mistakes. With Zuri flourishing, baby Caleb bringing new joys, and their own love stronger than ever, Bennett and Ayana stepped forward into the future, ready for whatever life might bring, confident that they would face it together, as a family. And there you have it, from a broken heart to a beautiful family, Bennett. And Ayana's journey proves that true love always finds its way home. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Did you guess Zuri would bring them back together? Were you surprised by Bennett's public proposal? Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell for more emotional romance. Stories that will take you on unforgettable journeys of love, hope, and redemption. Thank you for watching. Remember, everyone deserves a second chance at love, and sometimes the best. Families are the ones that take the longest to find their way together. Until our next story, keep believing in love.